Welcome to 5 Ways to Increase Your Vocabulary and Effectively Use Natural Language. This is a live video lesson by me, Kim, from English with Kim of EnglishWithKim.com. So number 1 is to always note the word stress, syllable structure, and anything special about the pronunciation. Now, as an accent trainer, I am going to start with word stress first. And the reason for this is that many non-native speakers only identify word stress later. They start working on their word stress when they're already more advanced English learners or even potentially fluent with a stronger accent. So what I want you to do every time you come across a new vocabulary word, I want you to note the word stress, syllable structure, and anything special about the pronunciation. Let's look at a couple of examples so you get a sense of what I mean by this. So I'm starting out with this word ramble, and I'm choosing conversational vocabulary because I have a conversational focus. So let's say you've discovered the word ramble, either by hearing it in a conversation or by discovering it when you're reading or coming across it because you're watching TV. It doesn't really matter how you learned this word, but you know this is a word you're not familiar with. So here we have this word ramble. And the reason I focus on this word ramble is I use it a lot in conversation because I tend to ramble. So I want you to pay attention to the word stress. I've said this word several times. You may have to look up the word stress if you're reading it, or you may need to look it up because you heard it once and you weren't so sure. Just try to figure out what the word stress is the first time you come across that word. Now, what I want you to do is have a notebook or an app on your phone where you keep a list of vocabulary. And when you learn a word, you want to choose a way to note word stress in a way that works for you. So you don't have to use the phonetic alphabet. A lot of people say, oh, but I don't know the phonetic alphabet. Do I need it in order to improve my pronunciation? It can help you, but it's not necessary. So really, when it comes to word stress, I suggest using a method that really helps you remember. So in this case, I'm giving a few examples of using capital letters and a little star in the second syllable, or using a bolded letters and then a slash, right? Whatever it is that helps you remember, or underlining. In the last example, I meant to have a little dot above it because that's how I do it when I work online. I put a dot above different words when I'm showing it on a document. Whatever it is that works for you, mark that word stress. Easiest way, capital letters and a slash, and follow it with the second syllable. You notice I'm separating these two syllables. It's a 2-syllable word, so I'm separating the syllables into 2 so that I can understand that this is 2 syllables. This is really key because you may not remember, or you might be pronouncing a word like chocolate with too many syllables. So I really want to encourage you to make sure you take note of the word stress from the first encounter with the word. So my special note here with this word is that it has the same pattern as the word people. And the reason you want to take notes of these type of things when you discover a new vocabulary word is you want to connect it to something that's already familiar to you. And it has the same pattern. People, ramble. It's not the same word. You notice there's an LE. So you're going to really pay attention to that pattern because it will help you remember when you're practicing this new word. And the reason I want you to focus on the pronunciation and the correct syllables and the correct word stress from the beginning is that as you continue to go deeper into this vocabulary word, you want to say it correctly to yourself each and every single time. You want to say it the right way. So you need to make sure that you're noting these specific ideas that you have about the pronunciation from the beginning. When I'm learning Spanish, I often note if it has a similar sound or a similar consonant sound or a certain way I need to move my mouth in order to produce this word. So it really depends on your comfort with pronunciation and how you're improving your pronunciation. So I see you guys are coming in. Good. Okay, everything's working fine. So I'm going to keep talking, but I'll go back and say hello to you guys in the live chat. I really appreciate you guys being here live. Okay. So let's take a look at the next slide that I have here. Ooh, wrong picture. Here we go. So the next slide here is pep talk. So vocabulary, when you're learning it, is not individual words. And that's what I want you to keep understanding. Even when you hear a new vocabulary word, like the word pep talk, you are It's two words technically, but it's actually one word working together. So this is what we call a word pair, words that commonly go together. So we have word pairs, or we have phrases or expressions, and you may learn them all at the same time. So you want to note the particular stress pattern for this phrase. In this case, pep talk. I have a couple of examples of how to list pep talk and how to write it down in your notebook, right? You could also, I suggest writing it by hand, but for the purposes of this video, I'm doing it on this slide. So pep talk, make sure somehow you distinguish to yourself that pep is stressed and talk is not. Pep talk, pep talk. And so the note that I made here is that pep talk has the same pattern as ice cream. You could also say something like notebook, or trying to think of the example, alarm clock. There's a certain pattern that you have when you have these word pairs, pep talk, ice cream. So anything you can do to help your brain remember from the first encounter with this word, these words are probably new to you guys watching this presentation, is that I want you to really be sure that you note down this word stress from the beginning, because it's going to help you distinguish certain things about the word as we go forward. So be sure you're noting the word stress. So for those of you watching live, please let me know if you have been doing this. Have you been noting down the word stress or the syllable structure or the particular relationship between the words and other words you know from the beginning? So you guys let me know. Have you been doing this? Have you been taking note of word stress, or have you been taking care of words, learning word stress a little bit later? Because this is going to be important to understanding. Okay, so that's what looking at this word stress patterns from the very beginning. So now that we've looked at the word stress, we've looked at the syllables to start paying attention to this vocabulary, I want to focus on understanding what else is happening around these particular words. So I want you to pay attention to the words around this new word. And this is what we call learning words in chunks. Chunks are those short phrases or the particular expressions that go around the word. And this is going to help you learn more effective vocabulary, because you're going to be able to learn the words as a chunk in different and start recognizing some similarities between the ways the words are used when you hear them later, or you continue to come across them as you evolve your vocabulary. So, like I said, try to learn words in chunks rather than in isolation. This will help you pick up on phrasal verbs, and do you notice I used a phrasal verb in order to complete that phrase? Start to notice collocations. Phrasal verbs and collocations are things that are really important to pay attention to, and a lot of you ask me questions about. And identify words that are often paired together. So these are going to be words that you're often going to use together. You'll also observe that certain adjectives are more common with certain nouns, and certain adverbs are more common with particular verbs and adjectives. You want to start discovering these chunks, because this is going to help you start understanding how the language works together naturally. Okay, so here is an example of the words around ramble. So I actually Googled the word ramble in order to find a recent example. I think this was from an article that was written yesterday of the words around ramble, because I wanted to find the word ramble in a natural situation. So this is from a newspaper. So let's imagine you were reading this article and you discovered the language you discovered the language, and then you said, hey, I don't know what that word ramble is. I know some of these other words, but I want to understand what words are around the word ramble. So let's just take a look at this example. It says, companions in a train compartment between Paris and Frankfurt, unknown to one another, Day and Manny's characters think out loud, ramble, and philosophize. For most of the ride, they do not technically communicate. Shifts in light, designed with sensitivity and nuance by Jesse Klug, tell us whose perspective is in play. So this is from a recent article from a Madison, Wisconsin newspaper. So I think it's Madison, Wisconsin. So notice, think out loud, ramble, and philosophize. So if I had my notebook here, what I would do is I would write down, probably think out loud, ramble, and philosophize. I'd write down all of those words together. And you guys tell me if you're watching on the live video, and also if you're thinking about it at home, do those words make sense to you? Think out loud, ramble, and philosophize. Do you recognize those words? Do you recognize the word communicate? Are there words in this particular paragraph that you recognize? There may be some other new vocabulary words as well, but you think about it. So just take note of what words are happening around this particular word. Now let's look at an example of the word pep talk. So I Googled the word pep talk, and here's the words around the phrase pep talk. So in this case, this is a title where it says Kid President. I think we all need a pep talk. So this is the title of a video on TED.com, right? TED Talks are really popular. So the chunk here that I would pay attention to is we all need a pep talk, or maybe I would just write need a pep talk. Sometimes more information is better. It just depends on how much time you have to type this into your app or to write it into your notebook. But I would probably pay attention to the word need a pep talk. And a little bit later, we're going to talk about the words that you do see in the description of this video. But this is starting to give you a sense of how the word pep talk is being used in its context. So I'm going to check quickly, turn to blue again, to see if you guys have any questions so far about what I'm explaining. Not yet. I'll answer some of those other questions later on. So let's take a look at the next step. So the next step to improving your vocabulary the more natural way is to write down the context where you heard or read the word. So in this case, you're going to write down the particular situation that was happening. So let's talk about the context. Is the word formal or informal? Is the situation where you came across the word formal or informal, right? Is it a more relaxed setting, or is it more serious, right? Is it professional or is it personal? Is the situation where the person's talking emotional, or is it a relaxed situation? Does it seem like this word that you came across is specific to a field of work, study, or your hobby? What if you heard this word in conversation, which is where these particular words I'm using were discovered? What were you talking about? Who were the people interacting? What were their ages? What were their social classes? What were the interpersonal dynamics? Was it a parent and a child? Were it two teenagers who were friends? Think about the context, because this is going to give you clues about the word. And it's going to give you clues about when it's okay to use the word, which is what so many people struggle with when they're trying to sound natural and more like a native speaker when using this language. Here's a couple more questions. What kind of conversation strategy was it being used to achieve? So maybe as somebody who focuses on conversations, I really want you to focus on communication strategies. Why would this word maybe be better than another word? In a future lesson, I'm going to talk about how to distinguish which word is better. And this is important. What kind of strategy was it being used to achieve? Different vocabulary is used for different conversational purposes. Also, what was the goal of the person speaking? Ask yourself more questions. Why would the person use this word? Were they trying to convince somebody, inspire somebody? Were they trying to explain something like the language I'm using in this video? What was the goal of the person speaking? Were they trying to criticize someone? Were they trying to be more compassionate and empathetic to the person? And what was the conversation or the text, because you can discover it however, what was the conversation about? What was the overall context of the entire piece of writing? Where will the conversation or the text be going next? All of these questions will help you understand more about this vocabulary word before we've even started to investigate its meaning. So the goal is to ask yourself more questions about this new word to help you learn how to use it naturally. So in your notebook or in your note-taking app, I want you to note down the responses to these questions. And this is really going to help you understand how to use this word in a more natural situation, rather than constantly being like, I know this word, but it doesn't sound right in the situation. So I just really want you to emphasize or to understand as we go through these type of questions that the more you can ask yourself, the better the results are going to be, right? The more questions you ask yourself about the language, the better results you're going to have in being able to use it. There's this certain amount of discovery and understanding the nuances of the language that's really going to help you deepen your understanding of English. So I hope that's encouraging you guys. So let's keep going and talk about the other ways that you can improve your vocabulary. So, or let's look at the examples. Okay, so let's see. I keep forgetting to show the slides. So if with the word ramble, I mentioned I discovered it by Googling the word ramble, and this is an article reviewing a new play. This particular situation where we see the word ramble is describing how the characters speak and interact. So we're talking about how they speak and interact. Notice the words that are happening on either side of the word ramble. We have think out loud, which is a form of communication, and philosophize, which is another form of communication. We also mentioned the word communicate a little bit later in the second paragraph, which is why I included it. So anything you can note about this context will tell you different ways you can use the word ramble. We haven't even talked about the definition, but we see words for communication. So I hope that's helping you understand something that you're noticing before you're even looking up the definition. And if we look at the word pep talk, this is the title of an inspirational speech on TED.com. So I'm seeing it in my Google search results. Kid President, who is a kid who tends to be very motivational, he's going to say something motivational. And you can see from the other information in the description below the link that he commands you to wake up, listen to the beating of your heart, and create something that will make. Already the language is motivational. So already, without looking up anything about the word pep talk, I have some information about the reason we would need a pep talk. I'm paying attention to need, and I'm paying attention to the phrase pep talk. So this is going to help you learn the appropriate context to use the word pep talk. Okay, so now that we've looked at how you can write down the context of these particular words and how you discovered them, I want to move on to the way number 4, which is to decide if you can understand what the word means from the words around it. So I'm going to check with you guys here in the live chat. Can you tell me if through my explanation and helping you look at the different things you notice about the word pep talk or the word ramble, do you have any understanding about the way that you would use ramble or pep talk before I've even explained what the definition is, before we've started to look? So does anyone have any sense of what the word ramble might mean? I mentioned earlier, I gave you a little clue that the word ramble has something to do with communication. And then we saw other clues. We saw the words think out loud, which is an expression. We saw the word philosophize. We saw the word communicate. So what do you think ramble might mean? If you're talking about characters in a play who are thinking out loud and philosophizing, what do you think ramble might mean before looking it up? By using the language that's around it. So anybody who would like to give me a comment in the live chat, what do you think ramble means? If you're watching the replay, I would like you to think about it before I keep going with the presentation. So think about it to yourself. Do you know what the word means? Do you need to look it up yet? Are we there? Now let's talk about the word or the phrase pep talk, or the compound noun pep talk, right? Pep talk. What do you think pep talk means? We talked about Kid President, who's very motivational. We talked about TED Talks, which are inspirational. We talked about needing a pep talk. So it's something that may perhaps be something good for us because we need it. We all need a pep talk. So what do you think pep talk means? Do you think you have a sense of what pep talk means just by paying attention to the context, where you discovered the word, the particular topic it's on, the person speaking, any of these particular skills that I've mentioned? You decide before you keep going whether you understand the word or not. You guys let me know in the live chat. And don't worry, I will get back to your questions once we go through the rest of these slides. Let's see if anybody else. Okay, so I see someone commenting. So I'm gonna show the chat box real quick because I see Ali is coming up with some responses. So we have ramble is wandering, maybe, and pep talk is to inspire someone, maybe. But you are getting much closer. So Ali, you get a thumbs up for me. I can't give you a thumbs up personally, but it's right here. So that's a thumbs up for me. So let's talk about it. Let's talk a little bit about how we can discover this language. All right, so let's go back to the slides. So decide if you understand what the word means from the words around it. You guys decide. You can decide at home. Okay, so way number 5 to improve your vocabulary is to search for the meaning of the word in your target language. avoid translating. So someone asked me in a recent live video how they can improve their English. And they said, should I be translating between, so I'm going to show you guys my face. So somebody asked me in a recent live video, how can I improve my English? And I said, you need to not be translating between English and Portuguese, English and Arabic, English and Hindi, whatever two languages. Don't be translating back and forth. It's really going to help you if you start investigating the word in your target language first. In this case, your target language is English. Now, something I talked about in a recent video I did with Sam from English for Study is he was telling a great story about how when he was learning Japanese, he asked his instructor, well, what does this expression mean in English? And his instructor said, no, 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 no. If you're learning Japanese, you need to learn the meaning of this expression in Japanese. And the reason for this is you need to be inside the culture of the language that you're using before trying to discover it through your own culture, because each culture and each language has its own lens, its own view on the world. So if you're really trying to improve your vocabulary, you need to be searching for the definition or the explanation for this vocabulary in the language you're learning. So in this case, if you want to know the meaning of the word in English, you need to be learning the meaning of the word in English. In a future video, I'm going to talk more about this and how this is going to help you sound more natural and really improve your vocabulary as you become more advanced and even fluent. But I want you to pay attention to that. It's really, really, really key to pay attention to the language from the cultural lens where you're going to get the right definition, the right explanation. And you'll notice when you start to investigate, you do get words that you understand. You can search from English to English. So you guys let me know in the live chat, or you think about it at home if you're watching the recording. Have you been looking up words in English? Or have you been looking up words in your native language? So let's take a look at how we can start looking at the meaning of the word. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to actually show you we're going to search for the meaning of these words, right? So let's take a look. So here's Google, right? Google is a great place to search for the meaning of these words. I'm going to make sure I'm on the right browser screen. There we go. Okay, can you guys see that? Is it all good? It's all good. Okay, so let's look up the word ramble. So we're going to look up the word ramble. So this is really important. So as soon as you search in Google, and let me just check that you guys can see that okay. As soon as you search in Google, you come up with something really key here that I want you to pay attention to. That you have the word split into its two syllables, and you can also listen to it here if you wanted to. Ramble, right? And listen to it. And this will help you understand the syllables, right? And this little apostrophe looking symbol that you see here is marking the word stress. So that's how you know that this first syllable is stressed. Ramble. So you don't even have to pull out a dictionary. You can literally enter the word into Google and come up with a bunch of different definitions. So I'm going to talk more about my favorite techniques to use these particular websites in a future video, but I just want to give you a sense of it right here, right now. So this is important. If we see the word ramble, we have two definitions. One is to walk for pleasure, typically without a definite route, and one is to talk or write at length in a confused or inconsequential way. So I would love for you guys, and thank you, I see a lot of you guys trying to understand it in the live chat, which is great. So which definition do you think is correct if we're looking in Google? Which definition do you think is the one that we were looking at for this example word? Give you a moment to think about it. Which word is correct? Are we talking about walking, or are we talking about talking in a confused or inconsequential way? Although I don't particularly love this definition of the word ramble. So let's take a look while we're looking at the word Google. Oops. Have a special app on my Google. So let's look it up in wordreference.com. Wordreference.com is also one of my favorite websites. It's actually, they have an app which I love and I use when I'm speaking in Spanish. So we look up the word ramble, and so we have similar definitions here, right? To wander around in a leisurely, aimless manner for pleasure, or to stroll, or to have a course or direction, or to talk or write in a wandering manner, often for a long time. This is a better definition than what Google returned to me, right? So in this case, this is a little more likely the way that the word ramble is being used, to talk or write in a wandering manner. So we already have the definition just by looking it up here. You can also see they've separated the syllable stress here. Oops. Where was that taking us? Oh, that's showing it a little more clearly. So you can see the syllable stress is there. You can also see that you've marked the word stress here as well, and you can listen to the pronunciation, right? And then you can also use Collins Dictionary, which I have here, which is also a dictionary I like. But personally, I prefer using Google for quick answers and word reference if I'm trying to be more specific. And we'll talk about that more in a future video. So here we go. So ramble is to talk in a... Let's look at the chat box here. Yes, you guys are getting the right answer. So ramble is to talk in a wandering way. Does someone you know ramble? Me, right? So sometimes I ramble when I'm philosophizing and I'm talking about certain topics that I'm passionate about. That's why these videos get long. That's just how I am. And so ramble is, like Elise said, ramble is wondering, or maybe wandering, right? But it's wondering out loud. It's talking. And Cecilia says ramble is to talk. Yeah, talk or write at length. Exactly. A short speech, or yeah, you're talking about pep talk, right? So this is a perfect example, right? This, you know which definition it is by looking at it and seeing the context. If I just looked in my dictionary without looking at the context, without looking at the other words that are around the word ramble, it's going to be really confusing to understand from when I see this definition that has to do with walking, because we're not talking about walking and when we're reading about the play. We're talking about philosophizing, thinking out loud, communicating. So pay attention to that context. It's going to help you remember when you can use the word ramble. So now, here we go. So we're looking up pep talk here. And let's hit search. So pep talk comes up right here. So pep talk. And so we've got the two syllables separated here. And you have this one stressed with that little high stress symbol. And this one is a secondary stress, which we're not going to talk about, but it's stressed on this first syllable is what I want you to pay attention to. So pep talk is noun. And you also note something interesting here, that it says informal, because this is a casual expression. So you can say pep talk is a talk intended to make someone feel more courageous or enthusiastic. Right? There you go. And then you see it came up with the example of kid president. Oops, I don't want to translate. I was just seeing if there were more definitions. So that's the only definition that they came up with. That's totally fine. And let's take a look at it in the word reference, pep talk. Pep talk is a lively, emotional talk intended to inspire enthusiasm, etc. And this is great because it gives you an example. The coach gave his team a pep talk during halftime. That gives you an example. It's usually a coach to a team or someone who's trying to inspire you. Then we have another example, a vigorous, emotional talk as to a person or group intended to arouse enthusiasm, increase determination to succeed, etc. And then you notice to give a pep talk to deliver a pep talk to. But most of the time you're seeing gave, right? So you're paying attention to the words. But I want you guys to think about when we were looking at the example, we had the word need, right? So if you see, yes, and I'll comment on that in a second. We saw the word need. So you can give a pep talk, but you can also need a pep talk. So what do we mean by needing a pep talk? I want you guys to think about it. What do you mean by needing a pep talk? Why would you need a pep talk? Why would you need a pep talk? And that's because maybe you're feeling discouraged. So you need a pep talk when you want somebody to motivate and inspire you. So that's what Kid President is doing in his video. He says, we all need a pep talk. And so he's going to give some sort of motivational speech. So I hope that was clear to you guys about the way you can kind of discover the language and use it more naturally. Let's talk a little bit about why this is more effective, right? So a lot of times people say, well, I just want a list of words, or I just want somebody to provide me with all the vocabulary I need on this topic. And this is something I'll talk about in the other two videos in this series, but particularly the reason this is more effective is you've already gotten your brain starting to think about it. You guys who are participating in the live chat, and I'll be sure to talk to you soon, or those of you thinking at home, you've started thinking about it. You've asked yourself questions. What's the context? What was the person's goal of this in this using this particular word? What are the words that appear around it? Do I know the other words? Can I determine the word's meaning from its context? This is really going to help you get your brain thinking. You're already thinking about the word stress. So every time I say pep talk, your brain is remembering the word pep talk, right? It's remembering ramble. Kim likes to ramble. So you're not repeating it wrong to yourself again and again and again. From the beginning, you're repeating the way it's supposed to be pronounced to yourself. So let's review quickly here. Let's review the 5 ways to increase your vocabulary and effectively use natural language. So here's what we talked about today. We talked about how you always should note the word stress, syllable structure, and anything special about the pronunciation. Anything that calls out to you that's going to help you remember the way that you need to say it and say it more accurately. Remember, your goal is not always to sound exactly like a native from the first time you learn a word, but it's to start using it as correctly as possible from the beginning. Number 2, we talked about paying attention to the words around this new word. So learning words in chunks. Instead of just learning a word in isolation, you're going to pay attention to the words that are happening around it. It's going to help you understand how to use those words too. I also mentioned that you should write down the context where you heard or read the word. So what was happening? Where did you come across it? What was the type of text? We're going to talk about this a little more with listening practice, which I'll go into later or next month in July. We'll talk more about that. But the context is really important. Ask yourself questions. Pay attention to what you notice about what's happening with this particular word. You also want to decide if you can understand what the word means from the words around it. Can you figure out the meaning without looking it up? This is going to help you remember it more. Pay attention to that. Don't be easy. Don't jump to Google Translate into your native language. See if you can figure it out yourself. And then lastly, you want to search for the meaning of the word in your target language, and you want to avoid translating, right? So you want to look for the meaning by using one of these resources I showed you or the others that we'll talk about in the live chat. So now it's your turn to ask any questions. And I'll just tell you a little bit about what's going to be coming up next. So as you saw, these were the 5 ways that you can improve your vocabulary and effectively use natural language. I'm really focusing on natural language here because I want you to discover the language in context so that it sounds natural when you start using it. The challenge is a lot of non-native speakers learn an idiom or they learn an expression or even a proverb, and they start using it in situations where it's not appropriate, where it might sound rude or uncomfortable or a little strange. So the reason you want to pay attention to the context is that you're really going to understand how people actually use it. And of course, I looked up these examples to give you something visual to see here on this video, but I really want you to think about when you are in a conversation with a native speaker, or maybe if you're listening to someone like me talk at length in one of these videos and you hear a new word, write down that word and even pause, watch the video. Why did Kim say that? What was she talking about when she used this word? As a teacher, a lot of times I rephrase the word into similar words to help you guys understand, but maybe you need to look it up afterwards. Think about what I was talking about. Was I trying to motivate? Was I giving you a pep talk? And you'll start discovering how this language was used through any sort of videos. In the future videos in this series, I'm going to talk about my method for discovering new vocabulary, what I suggest you guys do, and how to make it more effective when you're increasing your vocabulary through your own interests, which I keep focusing on in these motivational videos. And I'll also be talking about how to make sure you put that vocabulary into practice. So like Rodrigo said, I really want to focus on how you can actually use the vocabulary, because what's the point of having a list of all this language if you're not using it? There is no point. Rodrigo, the greatest challenge is to talk about action. Thank you, Rodrigo. High five for Rodrigo. I was reading some people giving advice on, I think it was on Quora the other day, and I was rereading one of the responses, and somebody's like, how can I become fluent in English or something? And the responder said, you know, everybody knows what you need to do to increase your vocabulary. But the problem is nobody's doing the things. And that's kind of what this series is about. Like, do you really want this? Here's how you can do it and do it more effectively. Because the most the most thing you can talk about how to learn vocabulary all day, but if you're not doing anything and you've learned 18 methods to improve your vocabulary, because there are lots of approaches, people are different, people learn differently. If you're not doing the thing, it's going to be very hard to actually increase your vocabulary. So that's a very wise observation, is it's like one thing to talk about it, another thing to do it. Remember, you're not trying to become a walking, speaking dictionary, right? The goal of speaking naturally, which I'm trying to express through these type of videos, is not to be a dictionary, because a lot of times when people just learn language without the context, without understanding the situations where it's appropriate, without thinking about those questions I asked earlier, and actually let's look at those slides again. The questions I asked you to pay attention to when you're learning different vocabulary, without asking yourselves these questions, it's going to be hard to use the language naturally. It's not hard to gain the vocabulary, but it's going to be hard to use it naturally. So let's quickly just look at these context questions that I asked you guys again. So pay attention to the context. Is it formal or informal? Is it professional or personal? Is the situation emotional or relaxed? Is the word specific to a field of work, study, or hobby? What were you talking about? Who were the people interacting? What were their ages? What are their social class? What are the interpersonal dynamics? How do they relate to one another? What kind of conversation strategy was the word or the expression being used to achieve? What was the goal of the person speaking? What was the conversation or text about? Where will the conversation be going next? Asking yourself all of these questions is going to help you learn how to use it naturally. If you can find an app that will help you do this and helps you learn it naturally, that's wonderful. Please let us know in the comments if it really does help you understand in context. But a lot of times, those apps are giving you useful vocabulary when you're trying to build an active vocabulary for everyday language. But when you are trying to learn a language that you're going to use in more formal or informal settings, or when dealing with people in a professional relationship, you're going to need to be more aware of vocabulary in order to be able to use it naturally, rather than just learning perfect language. And this is why a lot of times people take, for example, a business English course, because they need specifically to focus on language that happens in the workplace. But it doesn't mean this language is only in the workplace. It's just that this is language that's more likely to occur in the workplace. So I hope that answers your question. There's a lot of different approaches. So if this works for you, wonderful. Please leave a comment and let me know that this helped you and it helped you approach language learning a little more effectively. If you have other methods, don't be afraid to leave a comment and tell me what works for you. Everyone's different. We all have different ways of learning. But my goal is to help you learn natural language the way that people actually use it. And so I'm trying to show you this approach to making sure you get the pronunciation and the word stress, so important, correct from the beginning. And I'm also giving you the ability to focus on the language that's as it's used in context, so that you really pay attention to the culture behind the language, the cultural way that we use the language. So I hope that was helpful for you. A lot of these different methods that I am talking about in this video is what I used when living abroad, because I always use the word reference app when I'm living abroad. I also take note of the vocabulary and the correct way to say it and how I heard it, so that I can remember how to use it, because my goal is always to sound more natural, just like you guys. So I hope that answers your questions. So like I said, we're going to have 2 more videos in this series. We're going to talk about ways to effectively really understand the context, and we're also going to talk about ways to effectively remember and use natural vocabulary, as you guys have been mentioning. Thank you once again for showing up to this live video. As always, it was fun interacting with you guys and being able to share this information with you. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and share it with a friend. And if you have any questions, you know where to submit it. If you're still curious about word stress and you haven't signed up for my free email course, head over to soundmorenatural.com, and then you'll become part of my email community, and you'll get the video lessons specifically where I talk about things about pronunciation that non-native speakers often struggle with. So if word stress is a newer thing to you, or you're not really sure if you're doing it right, hopefully these lessons will help you. So once again, I'm Kim from EnglishWithKim.com. I am your guide to the essential conversation skills you need to sound more natural in English. Thank you for joining me for this video, and I hope you found it helpful. See you again soon. Goodbye!